Justice Marie Garrett was a Florida teenager who suddenly disappeared after school. Police faced a challenging case. The more they delved into the details, motives, and horrific scenario the killer had enacted, the more horrified they became by the cynicism and coldness with which the killer committed one of the most brutal crimes in the county's history. Friday, April 13th, 2018, was a truly ominous day. It was the day of a tragedy that put the state police on high alert. It was just 3 weeks after Justice Garrett's 16th birthday. That day, she was getting ready for school and wanted to spend time with friends afterward. That morning, she overslept and woke up later than usual, so she was already late for the bus that picked her up. Her mother, Danielle, who was 37 at the time, was busy getting her 5-year-old daughter ready for kindergarten and was unable to help her older daughter get into school. According to her, Justice walked to school. That evening, she was supposed to return on the school bus, as usual. At the appointed time, she failed to return home. At first, her family wasn't worried, as Justice had so many friends that she could hang out with one of them after school. This happened often. But time passed, and she still wasn't there. But her mother and stepfather weren't worried because they knew their daughter could spend the night with her best friend. Her parents had to get up early for work, so they went to bed without waiting for her. Even in the morning, the girl's bed was empty, and her mother lost her patience. She felt anxious and worried about her child. Danielle couldn't reach her daughter by phone, so she contacted the police. The police took a missing person report and began investigating. Detectives began exploring possible theories about Justice's whereabouts. They were used to teenagers frequently disappearing, staying with friends for a few days, but usually returning. However, the girl's mother sensed something was wrong, as her daughter hadn't communicated at all, which was alarming. Unlike typical cases, law enforcement officers didn't wait for word from the missing woman and immediately began searching. Investigators wondered whether the girl had simply run away. According to her relatives, there had indeed been some changes in her behavior in the last few months, which are typically difficult for teenagers. Her family moved to the small town of Sorrento, Florida, with a population of less than 1,000. It has a warm, mild climate and beautiful nature. The teenager changed schools. Considering she was a senior in high school in the middle of the school year, this could have created some difficulties for her. In such a situation, typical teenagers often lose control, avoid their friends, and experience difficult times. Justice could also have stayed with friends over the weekend after Friday classes, but her mother denied any such suggestion. Justice was mature and responsible, helping her with her youngest daughter, and not just disappearing without warning. At times, it seemed she was even too mature for her young age. She had no reason to run away from loved ones or problems, as she was used to facing them head-on. She always discussed insurmountable difficulties with her mother. Besides, all her belongings were left at home. Danielle insisted that something unfortunate must have befallen her daughter and that a search must begin immediately. Despite the assurances of law enforcement, Danielle grew increasingly worried. Her daughter had never associated with bad company. Attempts to run away or escape problems were unusual for her. Even if she had stayed with friends, she would have definitely called her parents and told them. However, the missing woman remained silent, ignoring all calls and messages, including those on social media. The girl was friendly and sociable, and did not use illegal drugs or alcohol. It was simply absurd to assume she'd decided to leave without telling anyone. The police checked the missing teenager's database and confirmed everything the mother had said. She really had no criminal record. Justice also had no history of accidents. Police began searching for the girl by contacting all of her friends. They interviewed dozens of teenagers, classmates, and friends. This sparked a rash of rumors that began to spread on social media. Students twisted Justice's story in various ways. Some claimed to have seen her sleeping on graves in the cemetery. Others claimed She had moved in with her secret boyfriend. Much of this information was fabricated. Selfish boys and girls concocted the most ridiculous stories, simply to gain more popularity at school and attract attention. In fact, she didn't have a boyfriend, and she'd never previously been in the habit of wandering through the cemetery. Other teenagers, who genuinely loved and cherished the missing woman, began to counter the rumor mongers. To do so, they staged debunking campaigns against these rumors and repeatedly attacked the most notorious gossips. For this reason, one of the girls was even suspended from school pending an investigation. The incident alarmed not only the children's parents, but the entire town. The community was outraged and tried to help with the search, but to no avail. Despite these obstacles, the police managed to narrow the circle of suspects and people closest to the missing woman to a manageable number. This included all of the girl's closest school friends, who were the first to be questioned. The police expected this would lead to finding the young beauty safe and sound. However, what they discovered not only dramatically changed the direction of their investigation, but also allowed them to track down one of the most bloodthirsty villains to ever confront the seasoned detectives. The police spoke with all of the girl's acquaintances and also interviewed teachers and classmates. Investigators determined that she never showed up for school that Friday, meaning she had been missing since that morning. A check of CCTV footage of Justice's route and her phone's geolocation revealed that she had indeed left home for school around 7:25 a.m. However, she disappeared about half an hour later while en route to school. But what happened to Justice along the way? 4 days after Justice's disappearance, on April 17th, a man contacted the police. He was out for a morning jog when he noticed a strange, unpleasant odor off to the side of the trail. This piqued his interest, and he headed toward the forest. After walking just a few meters, the athlete stumbled upon a human body. Rather than investigate or trample the evidence at the crime scene, the man immediately called 911. Police officers arrived at the scene of the tragic discovery and discovered a woman's body with signs of advanced decomposition. There was some minor evidence of animal involvement and hot, humid weather. However, the bulk of the tissue damage was caused by some kind of chemical. Forensic experts determined it was some kind of bleach, which had been poured onto the victim's body. Apparently, this step was intended to cover up traces and evidence. The deceased could not be identified at the crime scene. Laboratory analysis was pending, but investigators assumed this was the missing Justice, the woman everyone was so eagerly searching for. Her entire upper body was disfigured by chemical burns, but even in this state, it was obvious she hadn't died a natural death. Police only identified the woman before them after DNA testing. She found her final resting place in a wooded area near the town of Delanda, about a half-hour drive from her home in Sorrento. The upper body was severely decomposed, with bones exposed. The lower half was partially preserved, thanks to trousers and shoes. Furthermore, there may have been less chemical exposure there, so the tissue was less severely burned. The exact cause of Justice's death could not be determined due to the poor condition of the body, but strangulation seemed the most likely. The attacker had pulled her pants down to her ankles, and her sweatshirt was pulled up to her neck, suggesting sexual assault. Unfortunately, bleach destroyed most of the evidence, and this motive could not be proven. It was obvious the victim had suffered several severe blows to the face, as her nose was broken in several places. Police questioned the runner, who made the gruesome discovery and called 911, and he was able to provide valuable information. According to the man, while running near the body on the trail on the 16th, he saw another person in the area from a distance. Judging by the build from behind, the man appeared to be male, but he was unable to provide further evidence because the attacker was frightened by the noise of the approaching runner and fled. He found the stranger's reaction odd, so he noted the incident but did not approach the scene that day or see the body, only doing so the following day. The runner himself was not involved in the incident, a fact also verified by the investigation. He successfully passed a polygraph test and had an alibi for the day of Justice's disappearance. To obtain further information, detectives carefully reviewed surveillance footage from cameras along Justice's entire route, particularly at the nearest stop where the teenager was supposed to board the bus. According to the girl's mother, she walked to school on her own, but police soon discovered this was a lie. In fact, that morning, her stepfather, Robert, had agreed to help take the schoolgirl to school. He was just getting ready for work, where he worked part-time as a carpenter and general laborer. He hadn't been doing well lately and couldn't find steady employment. Detectives were unsure why the mother had lied about her daughter's journey to school. So, investigators interviewed the murdered girl's mother more closely. This time she changed her story and confirmed that her daughter hadn't left on her own. Robert agreed to drive Justice to school in his car. The woman explained her lie by saying that Robert's driving license was suspended. She feared he would be punished if she had told the police the truth from the start. This happened at a time when everyone still hoped to find the girl safe and sound, and the woman was certain her little lie wouldn't have hampered the search for her daughter. Unfortunately, there were countless similar deceptions in this case. Therefore, the investigation had to work hard to piece together the events. Afterward, detectives requested footage from the school's security camera, which was aimed at the parking lot. This is precisely where the stepfather and Justice would have stopped if he had indeed dropped the teenager off at school. The bus that dropped off the children at school also stopped at this location, and the girl missed it. Surprisingly, during the very time when the main participants in this investigation should have been captured on CCTV, there was a glitch, and the recording was not recorded. Therefore, it was impossible to determine whether Justice's stepfather had dropped her off. However, dozens of witnesses claimed the girl never showed up at school. No one saw her that day, raising doubts that he had arrived at the school. In any case, the last person to see the murdered woman alive was Robert. Justice's mother's boyfriend, only the stepfather, could know what had happened. The police brought the man in for questioning. They increased the pressure on him. Finally, the man began to speak. On April 29th, Robert revealed that he hadn't dropped Justice off at school. Instead, he'd driven her to a neighboring town, at her request, and dropped her off at the entrance to the city so she could meet a friend. According to the man, Justice begged him to do this. He believed he was her boyfriend, whom the girl was dating secretly, including her mother, so he gave in to her persuasion in order to improve his relationship with Justice and gain her trust. Robert says he didn't pry details from the girl because he had recently started a relationship with her mother and was desperate to please the teenager so he could continue dating Danielle. But Robert didn't know the name or details of the friend she was dating. Justice promised to get to school on her own and planned to take the bus back, so he was confident everything was fine. The man himself couldn't wait for her as he had to leave for his shift as a laborer in the Veloci district. He simply didn't have time. The police were stunned by this turn of events. Neither of her parents had heard anything about this secret stranger she was supposed to meet. He could have been the last person to see the girl alive or even involved in what happened to her. It was impossible to obtain any valuable information from her mother and stepfather. Then the detectives went back to Justice's friends, and it was this that helped them get their first valuable leads. The girl herself didn't have a boyfriend. All of her friends confirmed this. However, they also said that the victim had recently started talking about a guy online. She had met him on social media, and he had expressed interest in her. He wrote to her frequently, which the teenager shared with her friends. But Justice didn't appreciate his increased attention, and they doubted the victim would have dated him. Police checked the victim's social media accounts. They analyzed likes, comments, recent subscriptions, and conversations. Detectives discovered one account that had been actively messaging Justice in recent months and had been active on her page. An 18-year-old man, whose cover photo depicted a muscular young man, had been communicating with the woman for a long time. He openly flirted with her, asked her out, and complimented her. Despite the man claiming to live nearby, police were unable to find anyone resembling the man in the photo in the immediate vicinity of the murdered woman. None of the victim's friends recognized him either. Despite his active attempts to get to know her, Justice never responded to any of his messages. She simply ignored his messages. Nevertheless, the police were convinced this social media account was the key to solving the crime. Detectives thoroughly checked the obsessive youth's social media profile and information. They retrieved his phone number from his account. It turned out that the account belonged not to the 18-year-old, but to a middle-aged man named Robert Kern. It was Justice's stepfather. Investigators couldn't believe their eyes, as he had already aroused suspicion during questioning. They again turned to the man who had been so cooperative at the very beginning. However, the stepfather had now completely changed his stance and was refusing to cooperate. The police were persistent, as Robert had already been caught in a lie, and now all leads pointed to him, making him the prime suspect in the murder of an underage girl. Despite his resistance, the police arrested Robert Kern and conducted a full analysis of his personality to match him to the bloody crime. Of course, social media correspondence didn't give anyone the right to accuse someone of murder. By that point, Robert had practically become a member of the family, having been dating the victim's mother since the previous fall. He regularly stayed overnight at their home and was in frequent contact with the entire family. There was no evidence of inappropriate behavior by the man towards the girl. At the very least, Danielle was unaware of it, and Justice remained silent and told no one. Robert himself also denied any wrongdoing and denies any sexual assault against the teenager. He also dismissed the social media exchange as a bad joke. The man explained his intrusive messages with compliments by claiming he was trying to boost Justice's self-esteem, as she would have been pleased to receive so much male attention. However, his explanations sounded completely absurd, as Justice refused to engage with the man who liked her photos and showered her with compliments. She simply ignored him and dismissed him as insane when talking to her friends. Looking for evidence against her stepfather, detectives decided to speak with Justice's closest friend, Rochelle. She said they had been very close, especially recently, because Justice often stayed at her house. During one of these visits, her stepfather came to pick her up. He asked if Justice was okay, and when she planned to return home, but this visit frightened the victim even more. Afterward, Justice didn't go home, but stayed the night at a friend's house. According to Rachel, a few months before the tragedy, her friend stayed over so often that it began to seem suspicious. It seemed she was trying to avoid spending the night at her own home. In recent months, Robert had been staying at Danielle's place very often. Could his presence have been the reason the murder victim was reluctant to stay home? According to Rachel, Justice spent almost a month with her immediately before her death. She also noted that her friend had become more nervous. While she had previously been calm, she now literally flinched at the slightest touch. She also indirectly admitted that she was afraid of her stepfather. Her best friend recalled during questioning that she saw Robert the day Justice disappeared. She said he looked creepy. He had a terrifying look in his eyes, so much so that she actually felt frightened. After that, she couldn't help but think she understood why Justice tried to spend every sleepover at her place. However, Rachel couldn't pinpoint what exactly about Robert was suspicious or frightening. Despite this, investigators realized they were moving in the right direction. They decided to delve deeper into the prime suspect's background. They analyzed his social media conversations and cell phone calls. What the police discovered was literally sickening. It turned out Robert had a lengthy criminal past, beginning with 2 burglaries he committed in the early 2000s. Search history for the past month revealed searches for drugs capable of inducing unconsciousness, including chloroform. He also attempted to purchase this substance, apparently successfully. Furthermore, The perpetrator spent considerable time examining maps and nearby woods, apparently searching for the ideal place to hide the body and also searching for ways to clean the remains after learning about the bleach used on the victim's body. Detectives checked the geolocation of the suspect's cell phone on the day of the girl's disappearance. It turned out he hadn't driven her to a bus stop or school, nor had he dropped her off in the city to meet an unknown young man. Robert had deliberately driven into the woods, where Justice's body was later discovered. The cell phone remained inactive at this location for a long time, about an hour, according to law enforcement. Robert initially claimed he had to go to work around Volusia, but this was a lie. He allegedly raped and murdered her, then concealed the evidence. New evidence led to the murder charge being brought against Justice's stepfather. He was held in custody pending trial. The perpetrator's exact motive was never known. He didn't reveal it until the very end of the trial. But the prosecution believed it was murder with the intent to rape. Robert refused to testify in his own defense at the trial, but he never admitted his guilt. Despite this, prosecutors had enough evidence to charge the man with murder. The defendant's turbulent criminal past was brought to light at trial. Robert was first arrested in May 2019 in New York State on fraud charges. He has been held in the Volusia County Jail without bail since May 2019. It was proven that in 1999 he committed his first burglary, for which he received an 18-month prison sentence. 3 years later, he committed another theft, for which he served a year. All of the gunman's statements turned out to be lies. He claimed to have dropped Justice off near the school early in the morning and also claimed to have worked as a carpenter. However, both claims were refuted. After the deception was exposed, Robert began to come up with other excuses, but these were all lies designed to confuse investigators. Detectives were able to precisely track the movements of the attacker and his victim. They compared all the time periods. His cell phone and text messages led to the conclusion that he had been planning this crime for a long time. The prosecution believed the girl had no chance of survival from the very beginning, as Robert had been determined to kill. A piece of vegetation from the area where the body was found in the perpetrator's car. Although he claimed never to have been in the area, he had in fact been there at least twice. After committing the brutal crime, the man returned to the area again later. His phone was tracked in the area for a short period on April 16th. It is believed that during this time, he arrived and doused the body with a chemical agent to cover up the crime. At that moment, he was seen by a jogger who later found the body. The accused was 43 years old at the time of the crime. The prosecutor attempted to prove that his attack was sexual in nature. The defendant had long been attracted to Justice, but she avoided him at all costs, rarely showing up at home, and Robert never stopped trying to take advantage of her. Then one day, the opportune moment arrived, and he finally got his way, vilely taking the life of 16-year-old Justice. Justice's mother, shocked by her partner's murder, testified against him. She claimed that Robert prevented her from calling the police immediately after her daughter's disappearance, convincing her she was simply spending the night at Rochelle's. He then asked her to lie, saying Justice had gone to school on her own. His mother initially didn't understand why he'd asked her to do this, assuming he was afraid of the consequences of driving without a license. After deliberating, the jury reached its verdict in just half an hour. They found Robert